Before we dive into today's story, if this is your first time watching one of our videos, we'd love for you to hit that subscribe button. Your support means the world to us and helps us bring you even more powerful stories. Stick with us till the very end. And if this story moves you, share your thoughts in the comments and send it to a friend who needs to hear it. Now, let's begin. The moment the bride standing at the altar looked toward the entrance of the church, her smile vanished. The music stopped so suddenly that the silence felt louder than the organ itself. Nearly 200 guests turned in confusion toward the open doors. At first, nobody understood why the bride's bouquet slipped from her hands and crashed onto the floor. White roses scattered across the aisle. Then they saw her. A woman stood beneath the church doorway, soaked by the rain outside. Her dark hair rested against her shoulders, and a long scar stretched from her right temple down toward her cheek. Another scar crossed her forehead. She looked thinner than she should have, older than her 33 years, and exhausted in a way that only years of suffering could create. For several seconds, nobody recognized her. Then the groom's face turned pale. His lips parted, but no words came out. The minister lowered the wedding book in his hands. An elderly woman in the front row stood up so quickly that her chair nearly fell backward. "It can't be," she whispered. "They said she was dead." The woman at the entrance took a shaky step forward. Tears filled her eyes as she stared directly at the man standing beside the altar. "Ethan," she whispered. The groom staggered backward as if the sound of his name had struck him physically. His new bride looked from him to the stranger and back again. "Who is she?" she asked softly. Nobody answered. The entire church remained frozen. Ethan Walker could only stare, because the woman standing at the doorway was not a stranger. She was his wife, the wife he had mourned, the wife he had buried in his heart nearly 2 years earlier, the wife everyone believed had died. Her name was Amelia Walker, and somehow she had returned on the exact day her husband was marrying another woman. Amelia's legs trembled as she slowly walked down the aisle. Every face in the church seemed blurred by tears. Some guests covered their mouths. Others openly cried. Ethan remained motionless near the altar while memories crashed through his mind like a flood. The woman before him was the same woman he had promised to love forever, yet she looked so different. The bright smile, he remembered, had been replaced by scars and pain. The confidence she once carried had been replaced by uncertainty. Still, there was no doubt. It was Amelia. "No," Ethan whispered, shaking his head repeatedly. "This isn't possible." Amelia forced a weak smile through her tears. "I know," she replied. "I wouldn't believe it either." The bride standing beside Ethan looked completely lost. "Ethan," she said quietly, "what is happening?" He turned toward her, but couldn't answer. How could he explain something he didn't understand himself? Amelia stopped several feet away from the altar. Her eyes never left Ethan's face. For nearly 2 years, she had imagined this moment. She had dreamed about running into his arms, hearing his voice, returning home. But she had never imagined finding him standing beside another woman in a wedding suit. The sight shattered her heart. Yet she couldn't blame him. She knew exactly what everyone believed. They believed she was gone forever. The church remained silent until Amelia finally spoke again. "I didn't come here to ruin anything," she said softly. "I didn't even know today was your wedding." Her voice cracked. "I only came home." Tears rolled down Ethan's cheeks. The words hit harder than anything else. Home. That single word carried 2 years of loss, grief, loneliness, and unanswered questions. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. And while the church sat frozen in shock, Amelia's mind drifted back to the ordinary morning before her entire life disappeared. Before the accident, Amelia Walker believed her life was exactly where it was supposed to be. She and Ethan lived in a beautiful town outside Denver, Colorado. Their home was modest but warm, surrounded by tall maple trees and colorful flower gardens that Amelia cared for every weekend. At 33, She owned a successful community bookstore that doubled as a literacy center for children. Every Saturday morning, families gathered there to read stories, attend workshops, and enjoy free programs she organized. Ethan often teased her about spending more money helping people than she earned from the business itself. One day, he joked while helping arrange bookshelves, "You're going to accidentally adopt half the town." Amelia laughed. "Only half," she replied. "I was aiming for all of them." Ethan always laughed at that answer. Their marriage wasn't perfect, but it was full of joy. They argued about little things. They disagreed about paint colors, vacation plans, and whether Ethan worked too many hours at his architecture firm. But every disagreement ended the same way. One apologized, the other forgave. Then both remembered they were on the same team. Every morning before leaving for work, Ethan kissed Amelia's forehead. "Be careful," he would say. And every morning she answered exactly the same way. "You too. Don't forget I expect you home for dinner." Friends often admired their relationship. Some even called them lucky. But neither Ethan nor Amelia believed luck had anything to do with it. They believed marriage was built every day through small choices, choosing patience, choosing kindness, choosing forgiveness, choosing each other. Looking back later, Ethan would replay those ordinary days thousands of times, because when tragedy finally arrived, it didn't come with a warning. It arrived on a rainy evening that looked exactly like every other rainy evening before it. The storm had covered the mountains since early afternoon. By evening, rain hammered against windows throughout the city. Amelia remained at the bookstore long after closing time because a shipment of books had arrived late. Ethan called her just before 7 o'clock. "You're still there, aren't you?" he asked. Amelia laughed. "Maybe." "Amelia." "Okay, yes. But I'm almost finished." Ethan sighed dramatically. "You promised me dinner." "I know. You promised me lasagna." "I know that too. And you know I take lasagna very seriously." Amelia laughed so hard she nearly dropped her phone. "Give me 40 minutes." "Drive carefully," Ethan replied. "The weather is getting worse." "I'll be fine." Those were the last words he heard from her. Less than 20 minutes later, Amelia began driving home through heavy rain. Traffic moved slowly. Wind pushed against vehicles with frightening force. Visibility dropped with every mile. She considered stopping at a roadside restaurant until the storm passed. But she wanted to get home. She wanted to see Ethan. She wanted to eat dinner together and complain about her exhausting day. As she crossed an older mountain highway bridge, headlights suddenly flashed ahead. A fuel tanker had lost control. Cars swerved in every direction. Horns blared. Tires screamed against wet pavement. Amelia gripped the steering wheel. "Come on," she whispered. "Come on." For one terrifying second, she thought she had avoided the collision. Then another vehicle slammed into the rear of her SUV. The impact sent her spinning. Metal twisted. Glass exploded. The guardrail shattered beneath her vehicle. Her SUV burst through the barrier and plunged into the raging river below. Amelia screamed Ethan's name as darkness swallowed everything. Then the river took her away. Emergency crews arrived within minutes. Police officers, firefighters, rescue divers, and volunteers battled the storm throughout the night. Witnesses confirmed seeing Amelia's SUV disappear into the river. Search helicopters flew overhead when weather allowed. Divers entered the freezing water repeatedly despite dangerous conditions. Ethan refused to leave the riverbank. Rain soaked his clothes while he watched rescue teams work hour after hour. Detective Rachel Bennett approached him near sunrise. "Mr. Walker," she said gently, "you need to rest." Ethan shook his head. "Not until you find her." Rachel hesitated. "We're doing everything we can." "Then keep looking." His voice cracked. "Please." The search continued for days. Small pieces of the vehicle were eventually recovered several miles downstream. Amelia's purse surfaced near a bend in the river. Her driver's license was found trapped beneath fallen branches, but Amelia herself remained missing. Television stations covered the story. Volunteers joined the search. Entire neighborhoods prayed for a miracle. Ethan visited the river every day. Friends begged him to eat. His parents begged him to sleep. He ignored them all. On the seventh day, Rachel finally sat beside him and delivered the words he feared most. "We haven't stopped searching," she said quietly, "but you need to prepare yourself for the possibility that we may never find her." Ethan stared at the rushing water. Tears filled his eyes. "You're wrong," he whispered. "She's alive." Rachel said nothing. Deep down, she wanted to believe him. Months later, the official search ended. The town slowly moved on. Life continued. But Ethan's life remained trapped beside that river. And thousands of miles away, in a small coastal hospital under a different name, a woman opened her eyes with no memory of who she was, no memory of Ethan, and no memory that an entire world was waiting for her return. When Amelia opened her eyes again, everything around her felt strange. The ceiling above her was made of old wooden planks instead of the white hospital ceiling she expected. A small window beside her bed let in the sound of crashing ocean waves. She stared at it for several seconds before slowly turning her head. Every movement sent sharp pain through her body. Her right arm was wrapped in thick bandages. Her ribs burned with every breath she took. Her forehead was covered with stitches, and one side of her face felt strangely numb. A nurse noticed that she was awake and hurried toward her bed. "Doctor," she called excitedly, "she's awake." Within moments, an elderly doctor entered the room with a warm smile. "Easy," he said gently. "Don't try to sit up yet." Amelia looked at him with frightened eyes. Where am I?" she whispered. "You're safe," the doctor replied. "You're in Seaview Regional Medical Center. Some fishermen found you unconscious near the shoreline after the floodwaters carried you out to sea. You have been unconscious for nearly 3 weeks." Amelia frowned as she struggled to understand his words. My name?" she asked. The doctor looked at her hopefully. "Can you tell me?" She closed her eyes and searched her mind. Nothing came. There was only darkness. She opened them again, tears already forming. "I don't know," she whispered. "I don't remember anything." The doctor's smile slowly faded. He exchanged a concerned glance with the nurse before gently placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Don't force yourself," he said softly. "Your brain has suffered serious trauma. Memory sometimes returns slowly." Amelia nodded, but fear settled deep inside her heart. If she could not even remember her own name, how could she ever find the people who might be waiting for her? Unknown to everyone in that quiet hospital, a husband hundreds of miles away was still praying every single night that his wife would somehow come home. The following months became the hardest season of Amelia's life. Because no identification had been found with her, the hospital staff simply called her Grace, a temporary name chosen by one of the nurses until her real identity could be discovered. Every morning she attended physical therapy, learning how to walk without falling. Her injured leg often gave way beneath her, forcing the therapist to catch her before she hit the floor. At night, she sat quietly by the hospital window, watching fishing boats disappear into the distance, while wondering if someone somewhere was searching for her. One afternoon, Nurse Clara sat beside her carrying 2 cups of tea. "You're thinking again," Clara said with a gentle smile. Grace sighed. "I feel like I belong somewhere else, but I don't know where." Clara nodded. "Sometimes our hearts remember long before our minds do." Grace looked toward the sea. "Do you think I have a family?" Clara smiled warmly. "I'm certain you do. Someone loved you enough to miss you every day." Those words stayed with Grace long after Clara left the room. She began keeping a notebook beside her bed, writing down every strange dream she experienced. Some nights she dreamed about the smell of cinnamon rolls baking in a warm kitchen. Other nights she heard a man's laughter but never saw his face. She dreamed about walking through a garden filled with yellow roses. She dreamed about hearing someone whisper, "Come home safely." Every dream ended before she could understand it. The doctors encouraged her not to force the memories. The mind heals in its own time, they reminded her. Grace tried to believe them, but every passing day made her wonder if the woman she had once been had disappeared forever. Meanwhile, back in Colorado, Ethan slowly packed away pieces of the life he had shared with Amelia, believing that every unopened box represented a goodbye he never wanted to say. Nearly 2 years passed, and life slowly changed around Ethan, even though his heart never completely healed. His family and close friends encouraged him to stop living in the past. "Amelia would never want you to spend the rest of your life alone," his mother often told him. Even Detective Rachel Bennett visited him one afternoon. "We searched everywhere," she said gently. "We never stopped hoping. But sometimes life gives us questions that never receive answers." Ethan nodded, though accepting those words felt impossible. He still kept Amelia's favorite novel on the bedside table. He still smiled sadly whenever he passed the little bookstore that had been sold after she disappeared. Then, during a charity fundraiser, he met a kind woman named Claire Donovan. Claire never tried to replace Amelia. She simply listened when Ethan spoke about his late wife. Months turned into a friendship, and friendship slowly became something deeper. Before agreeing to marry him, Claire looked into his eyes and asked one difficult question. "If Amelia somehow came back today, what would you do?" Ethan lowered his head. "I would thank God for bringing her home," he answered honestly. Claire quietly wiped away a tear. "Then I know the kind of man you are." She understood she would always share part of Ethan's heart with a memory. Even so, she accepted his proposal. On the morning of their wedding, Ethan prayed silently before walking into the church. "Amelia," he whispered, "wherever you are, I hope you've found peace." At that exact moment, hundreds of miles away, Grace, who was slowly beginning to remember fragments of her past, found an old newspaper inside a waiting room. Her eyes stopped on a familiar photograph. The headline read, "Local architect rebuilds life 2 years after wife's tragic disappearance." She stared at the smiling man in the picture. Suddenly her hands began to shake. One name burst into her mind like lightning. Ethan. The newspaper slipped from Amelia's trembling hands as memories crashed into her mind one after another. She remembered their first meeting, their wedding beneath the maple trees, lazy Sunday mornings, the smell of fresh coffee, the little bookstore, and the promise they made to always find their way back to each other. Then she remembered the storm, the bridge, the violent crash, and the freezing river pulling her into darkness. She gasped for air and collapsed onto the hospital floor. Doctors and nurses rushed toward her. "Grace!" Nurse Clara shouted, "What's happening?" Through tears she cried, "My name isn't Grace, it's Amelia. Amelia Walker. My husband. Ethan, he's waiting for me." The doctors quickly contacted authorities in Colorado, but before official confirmation could arrive, Amelia discovered something that made her heart race even faster. The newspaper article mentioned Ethan's wedding, scheduled for that very afternoon. "I have to go," she pleaded. "Please, I don't have time." Seeing the desperation in her eyes, Dr. Samuel Carter arranged emergency transportation. During the long journey home, Amelia barely spoke. She held her wedding ring, which the fisherman had recovered from inside her jacket and the hospital had kept safely all that time. She prayed through every mile. "Lord," she whispered, "if I'm too late, give me the strength to accept it. If I'm not, please let me see him one more time." Rain began falling again as the church finally appeared in the distance. Amelia stepped from the taxi without caring that her clothes were soaked. She heard music coming from inside. Her heart pounded so hard she thought it might burst. Taking one deep breath, she pushed open the heavy church doors. The music stopped. Every eye turned toward her, and Ethan looked up to see the impossible standing before him. Silence filled the church until Claire slowly reached for Ethan's hand and then gently let it go. Tears rolled down her face, but there was no anger in her eyes. She looked from Ethan to Amelia and finally smiled through her own heartbreak. "Go to her," she whispered. Ethan stood frozen for only a second before running down the aisle. Amelia did the same. They met in the middle of the church, holding each other so tightly that neither wanted to let go. Both of them cried without speaking. Their embrace answered every question words could never explain. The guests around them wiped away tears, and even the minister quietly closed his Bible as he watched the miracle unfold. After several minutes, Ethan stepped back and gently touched the scar on Amelia's face. "I searched for you every day," he whispered. Amelia smiled through her tears, "and I never stopped trying to find my way home." Claire slowly walked toward them. Amelia immediately apologized. "I'm so sorry. I never wanted to hurt anyone." Claire shook her head and embraced her. "You didn't. Today isn't a tragedy. It's a miracle." The wedding was quietly called off, and no one blamed Claire for walking away with dignity and grace. Months later, she found happiness with someone who loved her wholeheartedly from the very beginning. As for Ethan and Amelia, rebuilding their marriage was not easy. They had lost nearly 2 years of memories together, and Amelia still battled nightmares from the accident. But every scar reminded them that love had survived what death could not destroy. On the anniversary of Amelia's return, they stood together on the bridge where everything had changed. Ethan smiled, took her hand, and said, "Once we promised we'd always find our way back to each other." Amelia squeezed his hand, looked into his eyes, and replied with a peaceful smile, "This time we kept that promise." Together, they walked away from the bridge, not as two people trapped by the past, but as husband and wife grateful for the extraordinary second chance life had given them. Like and subscribe to my channel for more contents like this, and let us know where you are watching from under the comment section.